to fix.
It is a day for presidential candidates. Welcome in, everybody. I'm Ed Berliner. Thanks for joining us. Rand Paul is at this moment preparing to take the stage in Louisville, Kentucky. Let's go live right now and give you a look into Louisville, Kentucky, where they have been getting ready since 11:30 this morning. Rand Paul, the candidate who tells everybody that he will indeed change not only America, the Republican Party, but the way that we live our lives. If you'll notice on the podium, there is the Rand Paul logo for this, and also the saying, if you will, for this campaign: defeat the Washington machine, unleash the American dream. Rand Paul made the announcement this morning on his website at a little bit after 9:30 Eastern Time, where he said he would be announcing and he would run for president of the United States. Many people today are going to be listening very closely to Rand Paul because, frankly, they want to see what he has learned from his father's previous efforts to become president. There is much discussion about what he will do in order to separate himself from what many believe is an isolationist tone. That indeed what his father took. There are those who say that Rand Paul is not an isolationist, that he will indeed have to make sure that that is something that he discusses. Something else that is interesting here today as well. There are groups already out spending a tremendous amount of money to place television advertising against Rand Paul. They are talking much more about the fact that he is not for the military. These are the same people who came out with the Swift boat ads several years ago. They are now, in essence, Swift boating Rand Paul and having him prepared to take on the same kind of onslaught. It's what Rand Paul says today that will get a lot of people talking, because when he says he plans to run as a different kind of Republican, it says many people actually who are the old guard wondering what exactly he means by that, what the Republican race needs to do, what the Republicans need to do in order to defeat Hillary Clinton. What is that different sort of Republican that he wants to take forward? He will face a tremendous amount of opposition from the hawks on the GOP side, because these are the folks who believe that he is not strong enough in foreign policy, that he simply does not have the military first and foremost in his mind. He has already said many times before that he wants to cut military spending, wants to make sure that our American troops are not involved in any wars. So this has a lot of people very concerned as to what he may or may not say. There are those also, as we wait for him to take the podium, who are already hammering away at Rand Paul today, saying that he's in the right place, but simply put, he is at the wrong time. Because many people, at least on the far right from the Tea Party side of things, believe that Rand Paul is simply not the guy to lead the Republican Party. Now, he will join Ted Cruz in a race. A lot of other GOP candidates are going to get involved. Rand Paul is going to get his chance. And then we are also hearing, of course, that Marco Rubio will likely do something next week. Scott Walker likely won't be far after that at all. So you'll have those in the race. Who else gets involved is something we're waiting to hear. But there is, of course, that left side of what's happening here right now. Because if you talk to a lot of the Democratic strategists, and we had them yesterday on MidPoint, we've been talking to them now for, oh my goodness, several weeks at least, every single one of them will say that the left is salivating at the mere thought of getting into a race with the likes of Scott Walker, Rand Paul, Ted Cruz. This is going to become the interesting point here as to whether or not whomever the Republicans eventually decide on, if they can defeat Hillary Clinton. Part and parcel of that comes into our next guest. While we're waiting here for Rand Paul, let us bring in the former Tennessee District Attorney and also the founder of Tea Party Nation, Judson Phillips, joins us today. Judson, thanks so much for being here.
Hey, Ed, thanks for inviting me.
Pleasure. Judson, you are the one who came out today and you indicated on your website that this is the right place at the wrong time, though, for Rand Paul. What did you mean by that?
Well, to borrow the phrase from the old rock and roll song, I was at the right place, but it was the wrong time, Rand Paul is really a cycle too late. Had he run in 2012, had he run instead of his dad, I'm not so sure we wouldn't be looking at President Paul looking at re-election today, because the isolationism strain in the Republican Party, I think, hit its high water mark around 2012. But since then, we've seen Islamic terror. We've seen the ISIS beheading Americans, burning people alive, doing just all kinds of horrible things. And I think a lot of sentiment among conservatives, among middle-of-the-road people, and even some folks on the left is we're probably going to have to go back into Iraq at some point, We're going to have a much stronger military than the hollow military that Obama is leaving us with. And I'm sorry, that's just not going to fit a Rand Paul presidency. He's not a hawk. He's not really a social conservative.
But do you need to be a hawk, though, Judson? I mean, here's the point in all this. Do you absolutely, positively need to be a hawk in order to be elected and in order to lead America?
After Obama, I think you have to be. Because right now, look at America and the world under Obama's leadership. Our enemies laugh at us. Our friends fear us because we turn around and stab them in the back instead of doing something to our enemies. So I think the next president, Ted Cruz or whoever, is going to have to be really, really strong. They're going to have to be a hawk, because once you lose that prestige in the world circle, in the world's eyes, it's got to be reestablished. And Rand Paul's a decent guy. I like him. I don't have a lot of bad things to say about him, but I don't think he's the guy that carries that kind of weight, who can reestablish America as the leader of the free world.
Well, let's talk about that weight, if you will. We showed this a couple of seconds ago. I want to show it again. This comes from your Facebook page today, where you were making some comments and talking to people about the fact that you would be appearing today on Newsmax TV, which you are a little bit later than you pointed out. But then later in this dialogue, if you will, someone came back and said, looking forward to reminding you of this post in 18 months. And you said, please do, as President Ted Cruz is sworn into office. Judson, come now, let's be honest here. You just talked about the fact that Rand Paul may not have what it takes to be president. You, though, feel that Ted Cruz does. What does Ted Cruz have? He certainly doesn't have the foreign policy experience. He certainly doesn't have a lot of the national experience. What makes him any better than a Rand Paul?
First of all, Ted Cruz has got some off-the-chart brilliance. But here's the thing that I love about Ted Cruz.
In what? Hold on. I'm not going to let you get away with that. Not going to let you go there, Judson. Off-the-chart brilliance in what?
People like Lawrence Dershowitz at Harvard, I'm quoting him when he said Ted Cruz was one of his students, and he was off the chart.
You mean Alan
brilliant.
Dershowitz, correct?
So it's not just my opinion, it's Dershowitz. Alan Dershowitz, I'm sorry, I was thinking of Lawrence Tribe.
Okay.
Alan Dershowitz at Harvard made that comment about Cruz, so that's just not my opinion. That's some guy from the left who's saying Cruz is absolutely brilliant. But here's the thing Cruz is doing that Rand Paul's not doing, and nobody else is really doing on the Republican side. First of all, he is sewing up the Republican base. He's going hardcore after the evangelical voters, which are a huge, huge base in the GOP. There's something like 57 million people in this nation who identify themselves as evangelical Christians, most of whom vote on social issues. Ted Cruz is embracing that, as opposed to the establishment Republicans who are they will accept it but sort of hold people off at a distance. But the other thing I like about Ted Cruz is he's willing to throw away the GOP consultant playbook. The GOP consultant playbook says, don't be controversial, don't take any stands, be the tofu candidate that has absolutely no content, and oh, by the way, don't challenge the Democrats in Democrat areas, just go for your base. And Ted Cruz is reaching out to a lot of areas that are not the traditional base for the Republican Party.
But I'm going to go ahead and play the devil's advocate here, if you will, Judson, because you will admit that there are a number of people out there who look at Ted Cruz and they say, and I'm going to be frank here, there are people who look at him and go, the guy's a whack job. You hear that, and you're going to continue to hear that.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? People said the same thing about Ronald Reagan in 1976 and 1980. And so, what your critics say about you is not what defines you, and I don't think Cruz is going to let his critics define him. But if we let critics define us, I mean, I know what they say about the Tea Party, and I'm sorry, I don't sit back and let these critics define me or the Tea Party. Cruz isn't going to do the same thing. And I think, I ignore the people who say those kind of crazy things about Ted Cruz.
We want to one more time go ahead and do a look in Louisville, Kentucky, because that's where we are now awaiting Rand Paul to take the podium. They started this a little bit around 11:30 or so is where they decided to bring this all out. They've had a number of people come to the podium now. They are still in the process of introducing him. I think they're playing it beautifully, because what they're doing is they're waiting until we get after the top of the hour, making sure that all the television networks, we included, are sitting here waiting for him to take the podium. So let me then dig into this a little bit more, Judson, because obviously we know that you don't stand with Rand, at least at this point, as many people would like you to. So then what are his positives? I mean, what do you see, though, do you see any positives, for that matter, in Rand Paul?
Sure. Just because I'm not supporting Rand Paul doesn't mean I think the guy's the focus of evil in the modern world. Rand Paul used to wear a lapel pin that was a red penny, And it was kind of a motto for him: cut 1 red cent from every government program. And let's say I'm completely wrong. Occasionally that does happen. And let's say
I was
Rand
just
Paul
going to
gets
say, I
elected
don't know
president.
when that's last happened, Judson, and I really don't know if you'd be willing to admit it, but please continue.
I will say this: the statute of limitations has run since the last time I was wrong.
Okay.
But let's say Rand Paul gets elected. He is going to be very aggressive on cutting the budget. He believes that in limited government, he believes that government has exceeded its bounds in numerous areas. So I think that will be a very good thing we would see from Rand Paul, and I would certainly support him if he became president in those areas. The weakness is on the flip side. He favors cutting defense spending, which, I mean, even Obama-appointed generals are now saying that we've cut too much. Even before he left office, Leon Panetta, the former defense secretary, Obama appointee, said, hey, we're cutting too much out of defense. So whether we like it or not, let's assume Rand Paul gets elected, whether he likes it or not, there's going to have to be a fairly substantial increase in military spending beginning in 2017. And of course, the good news is I hope Rand Paul would cut out a lot of wasteful spending from the Defense Department, because there is some. I hope he would cut out a lot of non-defense spending that gets attached to Defense Department bills, because there is a lot of that, because defense appropriations are always a must-pass bill. So those are a lot of good things I see about Rand Paul. And on my list of candidates, Rand Paul certainly ranks higher than a lot of other guys. He certainly ranks higher than Jeb Bush or Marco Rubio. I'd even rate him higher than Scott Walker.
Why?
Why? For one, which one? All the above.
Well, you've got all
Jeb
above, and
Bush
actually what you did was you've got him above Scott Walker, and Scott Walker is seen as many people as being the de facto leader at this point, certainly coming out in the polling. Many people feel that Marco Rubio may have the Hispanic vote on his side, may have youth on his side, may have a lot of things. So when you say that he's topping them at this point, what is it specifically that puts him on top of those? And let's not forget Jeb Bush, who many say is already going to be the king, if you will. He is the leader in many eyes.
Yeah. Jeb Bush is showing the Hillary Clinton syndrome, for lack of a better term. He's a rusty politician. Because think about it. When was the last time Jeb Bush ran for office? 10 years ago. And, running for office is particularly at the national level, is a unique skill set. And, I mean, it's a skill set you have to keep up. It's almost like being a professional athlete. And he is really, really rusty. And I think you see that in some of the gaffes that are coming out. A less than effective campaign. You're seeing the same thing from Hillary Clinton, by the way. But Jeb Bush is the establishment candidate. I don't like him on policy issues. He refuses to endorse a pledge that he would not increase taxes. So I'm seeing George H.W. Bush deja vu all over again. And the other thing with Jeb Bush would be another moderate Republican. And tell me how well that has worked for Republicans in the last 24 years. It really hasn't worked very well. Marco Rubio, ditto. Kiss of death for Marco Rubio with almost every conservative is his support of the Gang of Eight amnesty bill. I don't know that it kills him with conservatives, and I don't know that how much Hispanic support that brings to him. Scott Walker is a good guy, but number one, I see him following the Republican consultant playbook, so I don't know that he would be an effective or electable Republican. But the other thing is he's backed down on some of his core beliefs. For example, he was very strongly opposed to Common Core, but he's dialed that back. A lot of reports out of Wisconsin said that although he signed the right to work legislation and promised he would sign it, he had worked behind the scenes very hard to make sure that bill never made it to his desk. So that's something that's very disturbing with me. With Rand Paul and I think with Ted Cruz, both, two things I like about both those men is I think they're both pretty brutally honest. What you see is what you get with them. And I, for one, am like a lot of people in the Tea Party. I'm tired of Republicans in particular, but also the Democrats, telling us one thing and then doing something different when they get to Washington. And with both Ted Cruz and Rand Paul, whether you like them or not, I think you're going to what you see is what you get from them. I don't think they're going to beat around the bush, and I don't think that with either of those men, I don't think there'll be any question where they stand on the issues.
What about those who say, and you heard me talk about this, and by the way, ladies and gentlemen, still want to tell you that we are waiting for Rand Paul. We were told that he would take the podium at noon. So what we are doing, like everybody else, we are sitting here waiting because likely the second presidential candidate. Well, he has already announced it this morning on his website. He will be taking the podium in Louisville, Kentucky. This is pretty much part and parcel what politicians will do. They'll milk it for all they're worth early on to make sure that everybody is paying attention. So we're waiting for him to take the podium. But as we do this, Judson, we still have that thinking, and we have had it repeated here by every single person on the left. It makes no difference. And even some people on the right, the strategists, they say that Hillary Clinton and her people will salivate at the mere thought of getting a hold of a Ted Cruz or a Rand Paul, that they would destroy them in the general election. I would imagine, of course, that you do not agree.
No, absolutely not. By the way, I will say it has always been my goal in life to be Rand Paul's opening act. So here, I'm getting this here on Newsmax. But, to be serious for a moment, this is what you would expect from the left. They're going to say, oh, yeah, we can't wait. We're chomping at the bit to get at Ted Cruz or Rand Paul or Scott Walker. And at least with Rand Paul and Ted Cruz, my reaction to the left is, go ahead, make my day. Because, don't wish what you, be careful what you wish for, because you may get it. And I'd love to see Ted Cruz, or for that matter, Rand Paul, go head-to-head in a debate against Hillary, who, by the way, won't be the nominee. It'll be Elizabeth Warren. But I'd like to see Ted Cruz or Rand Paul go head-to-head with either one of them in an absolute fair and impartial debate. I mean, that's something you could put on pay-per-view, and I'd sign up for.
Well, I'll tell you what we're going to do right now, Judson. We're going to make sure that we put down, you said Elizabeth Warren was going to be the nominee as well, so that we can hold you to that one, too.